Welcome to the FAQ Shock, where we dive deep into your most curious questions about history, science, and everything in between. So we got this awesome question from a listener, historyfan_88, who asks, I've heard Mansa Musa was so rich he crashed the economy of Egypt for a decade just by giving away gold. Is that story true? That is a fantastic question about the legendary 14th century West African emperor. Let's get into it. And hey, remember to leave your own questions for a future explainer in the comments below. All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into the legend itself. Then we'll map out his golden empire. Where did all that money come from? After that, we'll play detective and check the original source of the story, followed by a hard economic reality check. We also have a great follow-up from another listener about whether he was the richest person ever. And finally, we'll dig into why this legend is just so powerful. So the popular story, the one you always hear, goes that on his pilgrimage to Mecca back in 1324, Mansa Musa spent and gave away so much gold that he literally caused a massive, decade-long recession across the entire Mediterranean. I mean, wow, what a tale! But before we start digging into whether that crash actually happened, we have to ask a more basic question. Why was this story believable in the first place? Well, the short answer is the Mali Empire was unbelievably, staggeringly rich. Just take a look at this map. Here, you can see the Mali Empire at its absolute peak. All those marked areas, those are the massive gold fields that made West Africa famous. And the empire? It controlled pretty much all of them, making it the #1 source of gold for both North Africa and Europe at the time. Mansa Musa's fame was so great that he was actually featured on the Catalan Atlas, which was one of the most important maps of the medieval period. And you can see him there holding a golden orb with a caption that calls him the richest and most distinguished ruler in whole area because of all the gold in his lands. They were not subtle. Okay, so the wealth was definitely real, no doubt about it. But how did we get this very specific story about a decade-long economic collapse? Where did that actually start? It turns out most of what we think we know comes from just one guy, the Arab historian al-Umari. He wrote about Mansa Musa's visit to Cairo, and his account is pretty much the main source we have for the whole claim that gold's value tanked for over a decade. But, and this is a big but, historians today approach al-Umari's account with a little bit of caution. See, he wasn't actually there. He wrote his story about 13 years after the fact, based on what he heard. He also might have exaggerated Mansa Musa's wealth to make his own boss, the Sultan of Egypt, look even more magnificent for hosting such a guest. Plus, his style of writing often included marvels and wonders, so entertainment might have been as important as accuracy. So if our main source might have been prone to a little exaggeration, what does the hard economic data tell us? Let's follow the money. This table really shows the difference in a nutshell. Al-Umari claims the value of gold fell and stayed low for about 12 years. But modern analysis from historian Warren Schultz shows that while, there was a dip in gold's value, it was a pretty normal fluctuation. The market back then was really volatile anyway. And here's the crucial point. The effect, whatever it was, really only lasted for a year or two before the market just corrected itself. It was a blip, not a decade-long crash. And to put it into perspective, this wasn't even the most dramatic thing to happen to the market. Cairo's gold prices actually saw even bigger swings from other events, like when the Mongols captured Damascus back in 1300. So this wasn't some unique system-breaking catastrophe. So this brings us to another great listener question that actually came in while we were researching this very topic. It's a whole other can of worms. This one's from EconGeek22, who asks, okay, but setting the crash aside, was Mansa Musa still the richest person in history, or is that a myth too? This is such a fascinating question, but honestly, answering it is almost impossible. A huge problem is that we're comparing two totally different kinds of wealth. Mansa Musa's riches were the assets of the entire Malian Empire. His wealth was the state's wealth. That's fundamentally different from a modern billionaire's fortune, which is made up of personal assets and company shares. How do you even begin to compare the two? And then you have the purchasing power problem. I mean, think about it. What can money even buy? All the gold in the world couldn't get Mansa Musa a ticket on an airplane. The things available for purchase change so radically that any direct comparison of wealth across hundreds of years becomes a pretty futile exercise for historians. So the takeaway here isn't that Mansa Musa wasn't rich. Oh no, he was incredibly, unbelievably rich. The point is that the story has been supersized over time. And why? Well, because it's a really, really good story. Let's be super clear here. The reality is still astounding. We are talking about a West African king whose wealth was so immense that it made a real, tangible, even if temporary, impact on the economy of the Mediterranean world. That fact alone is a huge testament to the power of the Malian Empire and its significance on the world stage. And that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Why are we so fascinated by these stories? I mean, stories of wealth so huge it can break the whole system. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for stopping by the FAQ Shack.